Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben, and in today's video we'll be doing a scavenger hunt tag. So I got this scavenger hunt tag from an old blog posted in 2017, and they credit Naz at Read Diverse Books, who posted his blog. Apparently the Library of Sarah was the original booktuber that posted this, but she says she can't find the original video of it. So we're gonna give this a shot and see how it goes, and hopefully we can talk about some lesser discussed books in my collection. First task is find a book with the letter Z in its title or the author's name. Okay, I know one. Oh, but it's in my room. Hold on. I'm doing a book scavenger hunt. Zara, S.J. Jones. I thought it was in the other room, but it's not. Found it. We have Zara by S.J. Jones. So far, this has been my favorite of the Barnes & Noble YA Book Club selections. It is about a girl in this fictional, mythical China setting who develops these magical powers. It's very much in line with a lot of the other YA titles, but I really enjoyed the characters. I felt like the romance in here was decent. I have a whole review of this up on my channel, by the way, so if you have an interest in learning more, you can always go and watch the review for this one. Prompt number 2 is find a classic. Okay. Classic. I don't know, can Aldous Huxley's Brave New World be considered a classic? I feel like it can. It's in the canon, and it's something that is regularly read in like a classroom setting, so sure, we'll go with Brave New World. This is one of those dystopian fictions where the dystopia actually seems utopic at first, so kind of a good counterpoint or a good pair read with 1984, which is like a police state. Here, people are controlled through subconscious messages as they sleep, and of course it deals with rebelling against this idea and the concept that this is not really freedom, this is not really what we want. So a good one to read and something I'd consider a classic for sure. Next up is find the oldest book on your shelves. So I'm assuming by oldest they mean like published, the like the oldest topic and not like the book that's falling apart. I'm sure if I looked around I could find something older than this, but I did pull out the complete Shakespeare based on the Oxford edition. So this is a book I think from college, and just has all the Shakespearean works in it. As far as kind of unaltered oldest material we have, this is probably a pretty decent estimate considering I had like a minute to go find it. So, and of course Shakespeare, as an English teacher, I feel like Shakespeare is something important to read, but I've had very long discussions with my students about how his reputation and the way that we revere him now is completely different than how he would be viewed in his day. So Shakespearean plays, when Shakespeare was putting them on, were not these like high class affairs. They would have been loud, noisy. People would have been throwing fruit at the actors they didn't like. They'd be booing. It would be very boisterous, and you would have the option of going and seeing a Shakespeare play or go see a bear fight a couple of dogs. So that's the level it was at. We tend to forget that what we now consider high art at the time that it was first produced was popular, and so had a different feel. But I do feel like Shakespeare is an amazing writer and added so much nuance to the stories that he was adapting for his plays. Find a book with a key on its cover. I've got The Starless Sea by Aaron Morgenstern. I liked this one a little less than I liked Night Circus, but I still felt both were very good. This one is rather meta in its meditations on the nature of stories, and has characters, for instance, who realize they're part of a narrative and get very anxious when they realize that they're in this book, because that means that the forces that be, when it comes to narrative storytelling, know where they are. And so they wanted to be somewhere else. They wanted to be outside of the story. Like I said, it's got some real meta ideas in it, which were fun, but was less, maybe a little less cohesive than Night Circus was. Find something on your shelf that isn't a book. Shouldn't be a problem. I just have to decide what I actually want to talk about. This is something that you'll see on the back of a lot of my videos recently, ever since we got the new setup done. And it is a nanoblock bonsai tree. So nanoblock's very popular in Japan, much smaller and harder to work with than Legos, in my opinion. And the instructions tend to be by layers, which is much more difficult to manage when you're having to make these blocks of leaves, for example. So this was a lot of fun to put together, but a little difficult as well. So very cool. Find a book with an animal on its cover. E. Aster Bunnymund and the Warrior Eggs at the Earth's Core is the second book in the Guardians of Children series, I believe it's what it's called, by William Joyce. And they're what the movie Rise of the Guardians was based on, like years ago. This was like pre-Frozen. I think it was around the first Frozen coming out, because I remember the crossover between Jack Frost and Elsa being a very popular piece of like fan art that was happening around that time. These were very fun to read. I really liked them for a young reader series that's still approachable and creative enough to hold the interest of an adult. So I'd recommend these if you're looking for something that's like a little bit easier reading, but something that's also really fun. Are anthropomorphic animals cheat? Oh well. Finding a book with a girl on the cover. Oh, bam, did it. Easy. All right, so this is Dirty Magic. It is the first book in the Prospero War trilogy. I have not picked up the last book in the trilogy yet, but I have read the first two. This is a urban fantasy series that basically treats magic like drugs and works like kind of a hardcore CSI style narrative where the detective is investigating these underground magic cartels. A lot of fun. I know there are complaints with the violence in here, especially because that violence is predicated on a woman. But I feel like it is, next to Dresden, probably my favorite urban fantasy series, and has a real tough looking woman on the cover. Yeah. Oh no. Anyway, find a non-YA book. Okay. Tim Power's Last Call is definitely not something I would classify as YA, although I don't feel YA is a genre, it is a marketing device. Last Call is a book in which magic works a lot off of the tarot and card rules. It's really interesting in the subtle ways that it describes magic and like the presence of magic. So a character will be looking around and they'll notice something in the swirling of the cigarette smoke in the room. They'll notice that the alcohol in their glass is tilting ever so slightly, even though they're on a flat surface. And that's when you know you're in the presence of real magic. There's a point in here where a character throws a bunch of playing cards or tarot cards into a car along with people they want to keep hidden, because since the cards are representations of actual like people and influences and forces, they'll keep the actual individuals in that car hidden. And it's just got like wild concepts like that I really loved. And it was a lot of fun to read. So something I'd really recommend if you are a fan of interesting magic or a fan of like gambling type stories, because it is about a gambler who gets in over their head. The caveat being it's for their soul instead of just for like money, a money problem. Find a book with stars on its cover. I think I know where I'm going to go with this one. It's over here. Robert Charles Wilson's Spin. This book is a pretty heavy sci-fi book in which the Earth gets enveloped in this field where time outside the field is passing much faster than time inside the field. So for example, at one point, to try to get out of this situation, we send a delegation basically, or we send a life raft to Mars to try to colonize it, try to deal with the situation. The instant that the delegation leaves, the instant that that ship leaves the barrier around our planet, I think it comes back like 5 minutes later and centuries have passed for them. And so it just has this really interesting play with time and an interesting concept. I felt like it read a little slow, so it is definitely a brain burner, but I think that if you're a fan of like hard sci-fi, if you enjoy Alastair Reynolds, for example, you'd get a kick out of this, I think. Find a book with golden letters. Okay, that one might be tough. Golden letters. This book called Dragon Rider has these embossed golden letters on it. I don't know anything about this one. It's from the author of Inkheart. I've seen the movie for Inkheart, but I don't think this is one of my acquisitions. I think this is one of my wife's. But golden letters for you. Yeah. And Inkheart sounded fun. So who knows? This could be cool. Find a book with a male protagonist. So this book here, Spellwright by Blake Charlton, follows Nico, a boy who was prophesized to be like the next great sorcerer. But magic in this world works on spelling and like linguistics rules. And Nico has dyslexia. So the way he interacts with magic is actually incredibly dangerous and incredibly unpredictable. And it just has some of the coolest magic of any book I've read in recent memory. I'd highly recommend this if you are a fan of engaging, interesting magic systems. Find a book with only words on the cover. I know one. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So, this is 10% off. I thought this was a YA book club book for a second. So this one is one that my wife picked up. She got 2 copies of it for Christmas, I want to say. And is actually something some of my students have read and told me the general plot synopsis sounded really cool. This idea of a person who no one can remember. They're like outside of time because no one can remember them, and they pull someone else into that world, I want to say. So I was not a big fan of V.E. Schwab's other book that we have. What's the title? Hold on. I read A Darker Shade of Magic and was not a huge fan of that, but this premise sounds really interesting. I will probably get to this at some point. It's just not very high on my radar. Find a book. Whoa, blah. Find a book with illustrations in it. What immediately came to mind was the fact that Horror Store by Grady Hendrix has illustrations within it of some of the things they find as they go through their haunted IKEA. It has some IKEA furniture, and then toward the end has some IKEA torture devices. So Not really IKEA. Hashtag not really IKEA. But this is a book about a IKEA-like store that uses that kind of liminal space and that uncanny feeling you get being in a place that's set up to look like a house to get those uncomfortable horror feelings in a kind of haunted house style story. Very fun. I like this one a lot. Find a diary, true or fictional. I'm going to possibly cheat a little bit on this one, but I want to talk about something cool. So this is my physical copy of the pen and paper RPG 1000-Year Vampire. And not only are these copies kind of harder to come by because he only produces them when he's running a Kickstarter or something like that, but it's just a really fascinating game. I've not played it yet, but I've watched some Let's Plays of it. And basically, you are a vampire and you record all of your... the game itself is writing up a diary with certain prompts of things that are going to happen. So you create your initial how you turn into a vampire story. You create your initial characters that are kind of surrounding the vampire. And then you are given somewhat open-ended tasks like someone betrays you or this event happens. And as you go forward with the diary, more and more of the older entries get crossed out. And being crossed out means you do not remember those events anymore. Your character has gotten so old that they don't remember what happened to them in the past. And so they could end up being this, like, starting off with idealistic goals like curing vampirism and being better, and they could end up being a horrible despot who doesn't remember the things that occurred earlier in their life. And it's just such a cool concept for a pen and paper RPG. You can play it solo. It's meant to be played solo. It's really neat, and I'd love to play it. I just haven't ever found the time. So I thought I'd highlight that. It's very cool. Find a book written by someone with a common name. The example given is Smith. Scott Thomas's Violet. I read Kill Creek last year and really enjoyed it, so I picked up another book from Thomas. This one has those like kind of like frayed edges, very tactily satisfying. And this one's a story of a person who goes back to their hometown where they had a imaginary friend as a kid, but are they really imaginary? It's a horror book. And so I don't know the answers to those questions. I haven't read it yet. But it was something that I specifically sought out because I enjoyed Kill Creek so much that I wanted to get another book by Thomas. Find a book that has a close-up of something on it. The Coldest Girl in Cold Town is just a close-up of a hand with the title tattooed on them, maybe. This is a vampire story in a world where vampires are relegated to certain cities, and this person has to like break in to save someone or to save themselves. I don't remember much of the plot, to be honest. I remember it starts off very strongly with after a vampire attack, this person waking up and being like completely out of their element. That was super fun. And then it started in with some of that romance and some of that typical YA stuff that really did not work in this vampire world and ended up not finishing strong. So a great opening for this one, but not something I'd ultimately recommend unless you're really into vampire lore and vampire stories. Find a book on your shelf that takes place in the earliest time period. All right, that one I'm going to get. Okay. The earliest time period, how about the beginning of time? Some of the Japanese tales in here are creation myths, and so I'm counting it. Also, these take place like very, very early Japan foundational stories, so I think this would still count even if we're not going with creation myths. All right, gotta hurry because we're running out of juice. All right, I'm going to do one more. Find a hardcover book without a jacket. Easy. I'll be right back. Whoa, all the Sanderson books are jacketless. This was my favorite one, You, Me, and the Nightmare Painter. It kind of has a weird double fish out of water story, and I know it was not everybody's favorite because of not knowing where the story was going to go, but it is my favorite. And so, yeah, jacketless hardcover, You, Me, and the Nightmare Painter. All right, very quickly, I'm going to tag Jen at A Jen Who Reads. I'm going to tag the Astral Library. I'm going to tag Kat. And I'm going to tag Vin's Book Corner for this tag. So consider all of you tagged. No pressure to do it one way or the other. It was just something fun that I wanted to get in here. And I had a lot of fun doing it. I'm tired, I have to run around. And my air has to be off because it makes too much noise when I record. So as always, I hope your reading journey is going well. Please like, comment, subscribe so we can build this corner of our YouTube community. And until the next time, take care.